So welcome everyone to Entry Points Between the Philippines and the UK. This is our last country session of the week. So my name is Rafael Schacter. I'm a lecturer in Anthropology and Material Culture at University College London. Between 2014 and 17, I undertook a British Academy postdoctoral fellowship for which I focused on contemporary art practices and the wider ecology of contemporary art in the Philippines. I was lucky enough to conduct around 9 months of fieldwork in Manila, working with artists, gallerists, curators, fabricators, writers, editors, collectors, filmmakers, musicians, producers, coders, designers, publishers, and a myriad of other individuals connected to the wider art ecosystem. I was also lucky enough to have been in the country during the run-up to the Philippines' much vaunted return to the Venice Biennale in 2015, for the first time in 49 years, under the direction of Deputy Speaker Loren Legarda, who will be presenting a video for us today. So my relationship with the British Council also emerged through the ongoing project Motions of This Kind, the first institutional exhibition in the UK dedicated to recent contemporary art practices from the Philippines, that I was lucky enough to co-curate with two incredible Filipino curators, Renan Laruan and Merva Spina, alongside 11 artists working either in or on the Philippines. So I'm super honored to have been invited to moderate today's session that will give an overview of the connections between and the challenges to UK and Filipino relations from both a cultural and socio-economic perspective. So we've got a lineup of fantastic speakers today, each of whom will talk about their work and these connections for around 10 minutes, followed by a collective panel session at the very end. But to officially open the session, I'm going to pass over the mic to the country director for the British Council of the Philippines, Lotus Pastrado. Before I do, I forgot the first thing I was supposed to do, which is to self-describe. So I am a white male in his very early 40s. I've got long curly hair and a beard. So I'm going to pass over to country director of the British Council of the Philippines, Lotus Pastrado now.
Hi everyone, welcome to the final day of our event. I'm Lotus Pastrado, Country Director of British Council in the Philippines. I'm a Filipino woman with short and brown colored hair, and I'm wearing a striped top in green, black, and silver. We are very pleased to present Entry Points Between the Philippines and the UK as part of Partner Southeast Asia's Arts and Culture Matters. The British Council's art programs strengthens engagement between the UK and the Philippines by supporting the development of inclusive creative economies, enabling organizations and artists to build international connections and transforming lives through arts. First, some quick facts about the Philippines. The Philippines has a large and young population at 110 million, with 48% or 53 million belonging to the 24 years old and below bracket. Up to 1.5 million Filipinos will join the workforce every year for the next 10 years, and people of working age will continue to rise until the early 2030s. The country's demographic assets present an opportunity for lasting economic transition while also raising the stakes for the country's future. The Philippines is one of the most dynamic economies in Southeast Asia, with increasing urbanization and a fast-growing middle class. In 2020, however, as with other countries, due to a COVID-19 pandemic, the economy dipped. It puts 2.7 million Filipinos below the poverty line and forced thousands of overseas workers to return and reducing foreign remittances. Foreign remittances, by the way, make up 10% of GDP. This is no small achievement. In fact, overseas workers are considered the country's modern heroes. There is also a dramatic unemployment increase from 2.2% pre-COVID to 9% in 2021. Experts are predicting that economic recovery will be slow and dependent on the government's ability to continue managing the health crisis. The Philippines has constitutional democracy. The peace process in Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or in southern part of the Philippines is of great importance to stability in the country and in the region. Meanwhile, the arts and creative economy are considered strategic components for a resilient and inclusive economic recovery. The Philippine Development Plan, the country's economic blueprint for the next 20 years, identifies a need to strengthen the creative sector and develop a policy framework to address concerns of creative and cultural workers, especially freelancers in the gig economy. This has made some headway through new legislations like the Creative Industries Act of 2021, currently being passed in the Senate. There is so much potential for arts and creative industries in the Philippines to raise the country's profile in the global stage, build up value, create jobs, capitalize on intellectual property, and contribute to sustainable and inclusive growth. On the other side of the world is the UK, which is regarded well in the Philippines and is gaining competitiveness in the country. It is the Philippines' largest European investor, and commercial links between the two countries are growing. The UK's creative economy has been significantly affected by the pandemic, but is recovering, partly through great support and new investment from the government. Pre-pandemic, it was valued at $122 billion, with high numbers of self-employed micro, small, and medium enterprises. There are many entry points between the UK and the Philippines, not the least through the Philippine diaspora in the UK. Over 200,000 Filipinos live and work in the UK. As of 2019, there are 200 Filipino community organizations and societies as are registered in the country, according to the Philippine Embassy in London. They are highly interested in keeping in touch with the Philippine heritage and support arts and culture programs through offering Filipino language classes, organizing Filipino dance festivals, and supporting theatrical productions. Filipino creatives and UK counterparts can learn together and share artistry, indigenous knowledge, expertise, and influence on the global stage. This magnificent potential is waiting to be unleashed, and we need to allow that opportunity of collaboration to happen. With the insights and analysis from our amazing panel of speakers today who are champions in their own fields, we aim for this session to ignite and rekindle interest across the seas and explore connections with a country that matters dearly to the UK and the world. Without further ado, welcome to the Philippines and welcome to Entry Points. Thank you.
Thank you, Lotus. Yeah, Malaya's clapping. That was very inspiring. Really super interesting demographic issues presented there, in particular in terms of both what's happening in the Philippines now and also Filipinos in the UK, and like a very inspirational message of transforming lives through the arts. So thank you for that. It just makes me even more desperate to get back to the Philippines, actually. Now we're going to go to a welcome message from Deputy Speaker Loren Legarda.
At the outset, allow me to thank the organizers, the British Council, and those gathered here today. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has taken us all by surprise, caused substantial economic and social impact on the arts sector, affecting the operations of most, if not all, organizations, leading to the cancellation of ongoing events, the physical closing of museums, and even the postponement of projects. We have been used to such a way of life that such disruption has led us to rethink the importance of these activities to our social and mental well-being. Though arts and cultural workers are adept and creative in finding ways to cope, the sector, deemed as non-essential by some, is particularly under pressure and remains vulnerable to the resulting uncertainties brought about by the current health crisis. A July 2020 Impact and Response Tracker special issue released by the UNESCO has noted the true economic weight of the cultural creative sector and the effects of the pandemic on this sector. The report cited the following statistics. 13% of museums may never reopen. 95% of the estimated 95,000 museums worldwide were closed in May due to COVID-19, and 60 to 80% international arrivals for 2020 were reduced, and it is predicted that up to 75 million jobs in the travel and tourism sector are under immediate threat, equating to a loss of $2.1 trillion GDP in 2020. Looking at these facts and figures worldwide, we can see that the arts and culture sector have been direly affected by the pandemic. This is the main reason why I have always been supportive of projects and programs that promote arts and culture through many formats and by means of partnering with other institutions. Launched in 2015, Dayaw, a television documentary series on Philippine indigenous culture, was my brainchild in collaboration with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, NCCA, and the ABS-CBN News Channel, ANC. It has evolved into an invaluable resource on Philippine culture that has been made available to the public. There is also Buhay na Buhay, another documentary series that takes a look at the multicultural dynamics of Filipinos. The show is based on the study of former NCCA Chair Felipe De Leon Jr. on the 8 living cultures of the Philippines, namely pagdidiwata, harmony with the deities, pag-uukir, poetic mysticism, pamamanata, devotion to the patron saint, pananahan, devotion to the home and family, paglilining, reflection and reasoning, pagprotesta, culture of social criticism, concern and protest, pag-aaliw, culture of entertainment, pagkabansa, devotion to the nation and being a Filipino. We are always in pursuit of deepening our understanding of the very soul and identity of being Filipino. And through this show, we witness how our culture continues to be very much alive and vibrant to this day. In August 2019, we also launched Likhaan in Puerto Real, in Intramuros, which serves as a space to learn alternative modes of learning through workshops, lectures, demonstrations on the Philippine living traditions. And to support and promote Philippine contemporary art, the Philippine Contemporary Art Network, PICAN, was launched in 2018 at the University of the Philippines Vargas Museum, which seeks to activate a network to coordinate a range of interventions in contemporary art in the Philippines. Since its inaugural launch in 2017, I am glad to note that PICAN has already organized 3 exhibitions, 2 curatorial workshops in partnership with the Japan Foundation, and has launched 6 groundbreaking publications. I've also supported the conduct of a curatorial intensive in 2016 in partnership with the Independent Curators International and the Metropolitan Museum of Manila. To showcase the artistry of the Filipino contemporary artists to the world, I initiated the return of the Philippines to the Venice Art Biennale in 2015 with a proposal titled Tie a String Around the World, created by Dr. Patrick Flores, featuring the works of Jose Tense Ruiz, Manny Montelibano, Manuel Conde, and Carlos Francisco as artists. It was followed in 2016 with the first participation of the Philippines in the Venice Architecture Biennale, housed at the European Cultural Center Palazzo Mora in Venice, Italy, which featured the exhibition of Muhon, Traces of an Adolescent City, curated with a team of Leandro Locsin Jr., Sudarshan Kadka Jr., Juan Paulo de la Cruz of Leandro Locsin Partners. And in 2017, the participation of the Philippines in the Venice Biennale was also historic, as a national pavilion was housed in the Artigliere of the Arsenale, one of the main exhibition spaces of the Venice Biennale, featuring the curatorial concept of Joselina Yeye Cruz, Spectre of Comparison, which brought together the works of Lani Maestro and Manuel Ocampo. The Philippine participation was sustained yearly as it showcased the curatorial concept of Dr. Edson Cabalfin in 2018, entitled The City Who Had Two Navels, the curatorial concept of Tessa Marie Guazon, titled Island Weather, with artist Mark Justiniani in 2019, and the curatorial proposal titled Structures of Mutual Support by architect Sudarshan V. Kadka Jr. and architect Alexander Erickson Furunes in the 17th International Exhibition of La Biennale di Venezia. Our pavilion this year was given the special mention as national participation, a recognition that proves that we are indeed making our mark in the international sphere. The importance of cultural exchange and cooperation is also evident in our partnership with the Department of Foreign Affairs and the several existing Philippine Studies programs abroad. And one of our inaugural Philippine Studies program that I supported and initiated is the one with the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, United Kingdom. Launched in 2017, we have already conducted several projects, including this year where we had a Philippine Studies Conference. Apart from the Philippine Studies program that we've had in the United Kingdom, we've also promoted the Philippines, our history, and our culture in Berlin, in Germany, under the Humboldt University, in Ruhr University in Bochum, Germany, Universidad de Complutense in Madrid, Spain, New York University, and the ASEAS Institute in Singapore. These are just a few of the many initiatives that I've been promoting all these years for the sector that has been so close to my heart: arts, education, culture. I believe that this sector has an important role in binding us Filipinos together. The Philippines is a treasure trove of literary forms, cultural practices, tangible and intangible heritage. This has been deservingly chronicled in history and excitingly integrated in the art of our time. We Filipinos take pride in how both customary and contemporary art surround our everyday lives. Every work of art, from the utterance of folklore or poetry to the gesture of image and performance, represents a new way of perceiving and creating our world. Many, many projects to bring forth art and culture. I've not even mentioned the Hibla ng Lahing Filipino of the National Museum, which we just opened also recently in Zamboanga, and which we did in the Ilocos region some time back. But that's for another event altogether. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Legarda. Yeah, there was a very powerful talk thinking about the disruption that we've all been facing over the last couple of years, in particular the effects on social and mental well-being, and to the arts in more general, some really stark statistics. But I also want to, totally back and support the amazing work of PCAN and of the three exhibitions from Venice, the three art exhibitions from Venice, curated by Patrick Flores in 2015, Yeye Cruz in 17, and Tessa Guazon in 19. I was super lucky enough to have been at all three of them. That's a kind of weird, humble brag, but it really was an incredible moment at all three of them, and really did make that huge international mark. Also, Philippine Studies at SOAS, when I mentioned Dr. Cristina Juan, who's doing incredible work there. SOAS is my alma mater, so I'm lucky to still be involved with them as well. So the British Council's goal is to build connections, understanding and trust between the UK and other countries in the world through arts and culture, through education, and through the English language. So our session and speakers will explore the existing links created through arts, through trade, through migration, reflecting on how these links can become gateways for artistic collaboration, innovation, and stronger cultural relations. So to start us off, I'm really super happy to present Professor Deirdre McKay, a professor of sustainable development at Keele University. So Deirdre's work draws on both social and cultural geography and social anthropology to explore people's place-based experiences of globalization and development, both in the micro and the macro. So I'm actually rereading Deirdre's amazing Global Filipinos from 2012 at the moment, which is very inspiring and was very influential on my own work in the Philippines. So Deirdre will be speaking about her research on the Philippine diaspora, her related curatorial work, which she's been conducting alongside the British Council, as well as entry points for culture work within this context. So welcome, Deirdre, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Rafael. I'm Deirdre McKay. I'm a white woman, middle-aged, middle height, long face, brown hair, and very distinctively in the Philippines, quite a big nose. And I'm really pleased to be talking to you today about the work that I've been doing, particularly with migrant workers as creatives and artists and curators. So I'll tell you a bit about how I got into this work. So I'm an academic, and I'm interested in creativity as a force for social change. My work is on the Filipino diaspora, and I've written books on migration and development in remote and rural areas of the Philippines. So Global Filipinos is about migrants from Ifugao province who moved to Hong Kong and on to Canada. And Archipelago of Care is about Filipino migrants in London. So the 200,000 Filipinos resident in the UK that Lotus mentioned, many of them live in London, and I worked with a significant tranche of them in putting this book together. And I'm a sustainable development specialist, so I'm really interested in where arts and creativity fit in the links between how migrants find work, where they move to, what they remit, and how that money is invested. So I've been working with people who come from the 50% of Filipino households who have their earnings supplemented or depend on somebody in their family working overseas. So one of the big connections culturally between the UK and the Philippines is just that channel of social remittances, of financial remittances, of information that flows back and forth between the Philippines and the UK. So I've always wanted to be able to make migrants' contributions to development visible. And the first project I was involved in with my colleagues Mark Johnson, Gabriela Nicolescu, and Patrick Flores at the Vargas Museum was called Curating Development. And this project, we got migrants in London together, and we put together a really interesting exhibition which showed how they remitted and how they invested their remittances So here we have the streetscape of East London, the small gardens, the little sheds, and layered on top of it are all the things that migrants are sending home. Political loyalty, training in forestry, union membership, school fees for children, healthcare, carpentry skills, religious observance, investment in motorbikes, etc. We've got an internet cafe, we've got lots of currency. We were trying to grasp the diversity in the contributions that migrants were making and how they were learning in the UK. So going on a French-Polish course and planning to set up a business back in the Philippines, paying for somebody's training, etc. We were seeing that as a really rich cultural field and one where the arts and creativity really, really resonated. So my next project, which has been funded by the British Council, is called Kamustahan, and it's an all online project. I've been working with the fine artist Natalie Dagnon, who's at Ateneo de Manila. She's our project lead and I'm UK co-investigator. Together, we've put together this team of artists who are working online with the Filipino diaspora. So not just Filipinos in the UK, but people doing migrant work in Taiwan and Hong Kong as well. So Alma Quinto, Henrielle Kaliwangan, Jason Dai, and our artist collective in Hong Kong, Guhit Kulai. Guhit Kulai got together actually in our first project, Curating Development, and they've become an online arts force in their own right. They're all actively doing domestic work, but they're also exhibiting artists and they're training others. And we partnered with advocacy groups in the UK, the Filipino Domestic Workers Association, Migrante International in Taiwan, and Serve the People also in Taipei, to figure out how we could use arts and cultural interventions and support systems to explore migrants' experiences of lockdown and the pandemic through creativity. So we did these Zoom workshops. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Here we all are Zooming away from our homes, from our home offices, some of us outside, some of us in the provinces, some of us in Manila, some of us in London. And our process was to build this platform for migrant artists to check in with each other. Kamustahan? How's it going? We're using arts and curation to mediate the conversation we're having and find out what's going on. We're sharing how the pandemic affected work in the arts and as domestic workers, and talked about the potential of digital arts to respond to new situations. So we had 3 online exhibitions that were produced through online workshops. And this is just an example of what we did in our first workshop to introduce ourselves. We did a little kind of curatorial exercise where we put together collages from the objects that were in our handbags. And this is really, really interesting because for somebody who's doing domestic work, amazingly, they're carrying around a camera and a sketchbook and a magnifying glass, etc. So being an artist, being a creative is a really, really important aspect of these people's lives. And they're busy producing creative work day in and day out for themselves, to share with others, to eventually exhibit. So our experience, we found that movement restrictions meant that friends weren't able to gather as they usually could, and that migrants had to defer visits to their families in the Philippines, and that people who were in precarious immigration situations were hesitant to form support networks. So with these public spaces closing down, they were missing the care that they received from other migrant workers and that supports their resilience. So this space of creativity and exchange of art that I'm describing is a really important part of the way that the Filipino diaspora cares for its members. So this is where the borders of Britain or the flow between the Philippines and the UK breaks down. This is very much an international, transnational field. And this is where people's resilience to keep going, to keep remitting, to keep being positive, to keep being caring is made, and it's made through the arts. So the digital floor we offered provided our migrant artists with an alternative venue for care, a place to learn new skills, or even to develop a potential sideline income from their craft or art practice. Their isolation and heightened vulnerability brought some feelings of anxiety about the future to the fore, but they were able to share craft and design and artwork skills and learn, and building community in that way assuaged some of their anxieties. So we made some digital artwork. We made collective collage, we did line drawing, we made wonderful flower installations, and we held a virtual Santa Cruzan, an online May Day festival where people performed from home in front of their camera. So our outcomes. We found that our workshops enacted cross-diaspora care. They were circulating feeling and skills to participants in a gentle and supportive and creative way. They grounded them in their creative practice and gave them something positive and visual to share through their networks. We worked really closely with our advocacy groups who were providing counseling and advice and referrals to other support services. And they found that this digital arts mechanism was really powerful as a way of expanding their footprint and strengthening their safety net for migrant artists and for migrant workers more broadly. So they want to expand their digital arts approach, and we're planning to develop a workbook to help them do this. We also discovered that our artists and participants really want to pair their digital delivery with in-situ events to complement and expand their artistic work. So we're looking at a way of printing out, curating, finding space, and delivering some of this work actually live in a way that people can visit as the pandemic abates, and expanding on this work so they can have proper in-situ exhibitions in Manila, where even if they're in Taipei or Hong Kong, their family can attend and see. And we want to improve our digital platforms. If you're curious, you can see what we've done and give us feedback online at Kamustahan Art Projects on Facebook, Kamustahan Online on the web, and Kamustahan Art Projects on Instagram. Please check us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. That was fantastic. I think that we could try and find a way of making those links public so the audience can see them and click on them maybe. What I love about that is the way that these social, financial and transnational ties are made so visible within your work. And exactly as you were saying, the way that art and cultural interventions can really explore these migrant experiences in such intimate details. Thinking as well about participation in social practice and the way that, what really is active participation rather than passive participation, and really engaging people in these creative outputs. And it also really made me think of Meryl Alderman Ukeles's work on maintenance art. Maybe that could be a kind of interesting link to be developed as well. Talking about the digital arts, however, and this digital arts approach that you were presenting, I'm going to pass over now to our next speaker, the visual artist Pio Abad, who works between London and the Philippines and has been recently exploring a very exciting digital arts approach as well. So Pio's work uses strategies of appropriation to mine alternative and repressed historical events, unravel official accounts, and draw out threads of complicity between incidents, ideologies, and people. As one of the most renowned young Filipino artists in the world, as one who has a highly embedded and highly esteemed presence in the UK, like Deirdre, Pio is a key node within Filipino and UK relationships. So Pio will be talking about his practice, which is deeply informed by the political landscape and history of the Philippines, as well as entry points for stronger artistic collaborations between the two countries. So welcome, Pio.
Thank you for having me, and good morning. As Rafael said, my name is Pio Abad. I'm a Filipino artist based in London, but I'm currently in New York. So this is the earliest lecture I've probably ever given, because it's currently 4:30 a.m. I'm a Filipino male in his late 30s with a shaved head, and I'm currently wearing a very bright yellow hoodie. As Rafael mentioned, my work is really invested in the history of objects. And I thought I'd introduce that practice through the institutions, both academic and arts institutions, that I've collaborated with throughout the past 16 years that I've been living in the UK. So, I've been living in the UK for quite some time. So I moved to the UK to study in 2004. And this is an image of the Glasgow School of Art, which sadly the building no longer exists. It caught fire a few years ago, but my journey in the UK really started in this building, this really beautiful Art Nouveau structure designed by Charles Ronnie Mackintosh. So I moved from Manila to Glasgow to pursue this, to pursue painting and to pursue printmaking and drawing. And it was a really vibrant time to be in Scotland. And, the shift between Manila and Glasgow was quite abrupt, as you can imagine, to go from 40-degree weather to no sun for 5 months is a little bit of a shock. But at the time, Glasgow was really a really vibrant city for emerging artists. And I think moving there really expanded the possibilities of, of whether it's possible, to make a living as an artist. And there were so many artists taking over, turning their bedrooms into galleries. You'd see these installations in a kind of bedroom turned gallery one year, and then the next year will be nominated for the Turner Prize. So that expansion of possibility was really formative, in my early years, trying to find my bearings in the UK. And from Glasgow, I then moved to London, where I went to the Royal Academy of Arts in London. I believe I'm still the only Filipino who's had the privilege of studying in the course. And I think at that time, MAs are quite a good point to really question, the kind of work you make and really why you're introducing objects to the world in a world already drowning in objects. And this was when the need to tell the story of the Philippines really, I felt it very strongly. And there's a really good John le Carré quote of he talks about having the privilege of being born with a subject matter. And that's something that I really take to heart in my practice. So my MA show, which is image here in 2012, really sparked what has now been a 10-year engagement with Philippine history, particularly the political history of the Philippines from the mid-60s to the mid-80s, but increasingly to the present. My first experience of a museum when I was 5 in Manila was the hastily constructed museum in the basement of the Malacañang Palace, which was made of the personal effects that the dictators Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos had left behind when they were kicked out of office in '86. And that really was the starting point in thinking about making objects and telling stories, especially because as the museum was a temporary one, and as it was packed away in the early 90s, there was a sense that the history it was talking about, this really period of trauma and impunity in the Philippines during the Marcos dictatorship, was slowly being forgotten. And so this idea of making objects and making exhibitions as a way of asserting collective memory, as a way of reorienting political narratives, and as a way of really excavating and making sure that certain aspects of history are never forgotten. So this show brings together different both real and fictional objects related to actual narratives dealing with Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos. This is another view of the exhibition. So there's I mean, I think as someone really invested in objects, I'm really interested in, you know, how material can generate narratives. So the work kind of encompasses painting, sculpture, silk, fabric works, and even, like, you know, found images like this postcard with Imelda Marcos in the center that I found on eBay. So this kind of curating speculative and actual artifacts to assert a history that is slowly being revised and slowly being forgotten. And this has been the armature of the project, really, this understanding Philippine history through the trauma of the dictatorship. And I've been expanding this project further over the past few years. So after this show at my MA at the Royal Academy, I then did my first solo show in the UK at an institution called Gasworks. And this is an institution that, you know, I've now had quite a long-standing relationship with. And this show expands the project further. So I created this museum-like space that reconstruct Ferdinand and Imelda's collection of objects. So they're old master paintings, they're statuary. So the statue here is actually an enlarged version of a statue they commissioned of these mythical Filipino figures, Malakas and Maganda, the strong one and the beautiful one. And these were mythical figures that they co-opted as, in a way, the insignia of their authoritarian regime. You know, they presented themselves as the kind of the mother and father figure at the point of origin of Philippine history. And what's interesting is, as they were appropriating sort of creationist indigenous myth, they were also creating this almost royal fantasy of power. So, you know, they had amassed this huge collection of old master paintings, and they also had at that time the largest collection of silverware, of Regency era silverware, owned by a single collection. And I think they're, you know, I think hidden, or not so much hidden, but kind of a huge part of this visualization of their power is obviously how notions of imperialism and colonialism shaped this imaginary. And that's something that I've been really interested in, kind of looking at Philippine history, but also mapping it amidst a larger constellation of objects. So Gasworks gave me that show. And I think alongside that, I've also had the privilege of really working with Gasworks on a number of projects, one of which is a residency awarded to a Filipino artist every year. I realize I'm going to have to go through this very quickly. I told you I can talk. And so that then led to this project, which is and then another reconstruction. It's a reconstruction of Imelda Marcos's jewelry collection, the so-called Hawaii collection, which we've remade as 3D printed sculptures. This is a collaboration with my wife, who's a British jewelry designer, Frances Wadsworth Jones. And so, you know, and this was recently acquired by Tate Modern, and it's actually one of the first 3D printed works that they'd acquired. So it's interesting, alongside kind of expanding the historical narratives within the British context, we're also kind of expanding the material possibilities of what sculpture is within British collections. And during the pandemic, we've expanded this project into the digital space. So we've created an augmented reality version of the project, which the public is able to access through a website called the collection of Jane and William Saunders.com. Jane, Ryan, and William Saunders being the alter egos that the Marcoses had used to open Swiss bank accounts. So these kind of these interlocking histories of imperialism, of empire, of colonialism, of desire, of appropriated imaginations, and these are all kind of imbricated within the work. I wanted to end with one last project, which isn't actually my work. I'll kind of breeze through these very quickly. But this was another aspect of my practice as an artist. I'm a curator, and I curate particularly my aunt, Filipino American artist Pio Abad's work. And in 2020, we staged the first major exhibition of her work in the UK at the Spike Island in Bristol. And sadly, the exhibition was curtailed by lockdown. So we opened in January 2020, and it stayed open until March 2020. But I think during that time, it still became one of the most visited exhibitions in Bristol. And it was a great kind of introduction of her practice to the UK audience. And what's interesting now actually is, alongside the work, the Tate acquiring my work, Pasita's work is actually on display both at Tate Liverpool and Tate St. Ives. So it's been an interesting and a very encouraging journey over the past few years. And really, like, you know, I think my experience is a testament to the fact that, you know, Filipino art is definitely very, very much present in the UK, and it will continue to do so through all these collaborations and these partnerships that we, you know, collectively have established over the past few years. Sorry for going over, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Pio. I mean, there's so much to talk about. It is very hard to keep it in that time frame. I think alongside Pasita's work, which is incredible that is in the Tate, also there is this kind of, you know, turn back to all these artists that have been missed out from, you know, the canon, such as David Medallia as well, another really key Filipino artist in terms of the relationship with the UK, whose work was very latterly acquired by the Tate as well. Lots of questions I'd love to ask you about Glasgow and the relationship with Manila. And I also love the idea of why we're introducing objects into the world with this, as he said, when in world drowning in objects. I do love that idea. Also, just briefly, Gasworks, when we're talking about these key nodes for Filipino and British relationship, Gasworks, which I think of course has a lot to do with Pio, with your residence there, is another one of these really key locations due to this ongoing annual residency between Outset, supported by Mercedes Zobel. So Issei Rodriguez, an incredible Filipino artist who was at the 2017 Venice Biennale, will be coming in January. So there's this kind of annual kind of relationship that's ongoing, which is super exciting. So thank you again, Pio. So our next speaker, I'm excited to say, is Chris Millardo. Chris is the artistic director of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, a stunning brutalist site designed by the legendary Leandro Locsin, and most likely the key artistic center in the Philippines. Chris has worked there for almost 20 years. So he oversees the center's artistic programs in the performing arts, literature, cinema, and the visual arts. And this year led the center's shift to online programming in response to the pandemic. So Chris will discuss the CCP's programs and entry points in terms of international artistic collaborations. So welcome, Chris. Thank you.
I'm Chris Miliado. I'm Vice President and Artistic Director of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, and I'm a brown Filipino man with gray silver hair, and I just turned 60 a few months ago. As we say in the Philippines, mabuhay, greetings, and I'm connecting right now from my office at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. This past week, the center opened its doors once again to the public after more than 17 months of sporadic lockdowns. As we restart the on-site programs and help the arts and culture community get back on its feet, this conversation on connections and collaborations couldn't be more timely and necessary. Three things immediately come to mind when thinking about nodes of artistic engagement between the Philippines and the United Kingdom: Shakespeare, Miss Saigon, and creative industry. Who doesn't know Shakespeare? The works of William Shakespeare introduced many Filipinos to the English language as well as English dramatic literature via the American educational system. Declaiming "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears" countless times in secondary school prepared many schoolboys like me for the consumption of the Bard's content served as film, ballet, symphony, and now interactive digital media. Many Philippine theater companies translated and adapted these works of Shakespeare. For example, Romeo courts Juliet using text messages. A Midsummer Night's Dream reimagined as a local folktale and performed in Maranao verse, a language in southern Philippines. The Tempest, set in the aftermath of Hurricane Haiyan, which devastated the central islands of the country. The resonance of Shakespeare's stories, characters, and thematics have had a grip on the imagination of several generations of Filipino playwrights, directors, actors, and creatives. The theatrical influence of Shakespeare endures and continues to this day with its profound engagement with Philippine theater and society. The Cameron Mackintosh West End production of the musical Miss Saigon catapulted the careers of many Filipino musical theater talents on the world stage. Auditions of the original production held at the CCP harvested many homegrown Filipino musical theater talents. Some of them garnered top acting awards and continued to perform in lead roles in London and European productions. The example of these Filipino talents on the international stage raised the standards of theater performance in the Philippines. After years of success on West End, Miss Saigon finally premiered at the CCP and ran for 6 months, making the production the longest running big-ticket commercial musical hosted by the center. The production paved the way for other international touring shows such as The Phantom of the Opera, Cats, Mamma Mia, to name a few. These international productions broadened the taste of local audiences to world theater and stimulated an already growing appetite for locally produced original Filipino musicals. The international touring companies also employed local technical crew whose exposure to state-of-the-art theater technology raised standards of local theater practice. Now, the idea of creative industries was, when first introduced many years ago by the British Council, tasted strange and exotic as the Scottish delicacy haggis. Through the years, through a series of collaborative sessions with the cultural administrators of the CCP or the Cultural Center, the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, and the Department of Trade and of Industry, the British Council slow-cooked the theory and practice of creative industry until it became part of the national development menu. Recently, legislators passed an act, quote, providing for the promotion and development of the Philippine creative industries and providing funds therefore, unquote. I believe this is a development that has been the effect of many years of patience of introducing the concept of creative industry to the local arts community. On all three aspects, the popularization of Shakespeare and world theater, the professionalization of talent for musical theater production, and the integration of theory and practice of creative industries in Philippine cultural work, the CCP has played a pivotal role by showcasing artistic excellence, developing audiences, and training the next generation of artists and cultural workers. So what are the opportunities for collaboration with the Cultural Center of the Philippines? Collaborations are enabled through the International Presenting Program. The center collaborates with embassies to bring artists to perform at the venues, interact with audiences, and share advanced skills to local artists. An active cultural agreement between countries optimizes funding and logistics. Examples of these productions are shows that have been brought over from the Edinburgh Festival and Fringe, major tours of the Globe Shakespeare, the King Singers, the Swingle Singers, Kanduko Dance Company, the Royal Shakespeare Company, to name a few. The agreements have also made possible the engagement of performers, choreographers, and designers of great reputation to interact with local artists and audiences. An area of great potential emerged during the pandemic, which is the development of digital content in the arts. And I'm so surprised and happy to connect with Pio here, because Pio is actually going to collaborate with us next year in the opening of what we call the 21st Century Arts Museum, which is a reinvention of the physical museum that will live online, and we'll have commissioned commissioned artistic work that's going to live online. And I think Pio mentioned some of the described a project that you will find at the 21st Century Arts Museum, which is set to launch next year. The great pandemic lockdown caused the pivot to digital platforms. Issues of digital production, dissemination, and marketing came to fore. As much as the digital pivot opened up innovation, it also presented great challenges with regards to viability and sustainability. The opening of a new facility for the performing arts was set in 2020. The pandemic caused massive delays in the construction and completion of the new Black Box Theater, which is now set to open in the third quarter of 2022. The CCP is now in search for collaborations that will include brave works, brave ideas for brave audiences. To give you an idea of other possible nodes of engagement, here's an introductory video of the Cultural Center of the Philippines and what it does. Play the video, please.
The center's flagship for artistic excellence is the Resident Company Program, composed of 9 companies, namely the Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra, the country's premier symphonic orchestra, composed of leading instrumental musicians. World-renowned conductors and soloists have performed with the Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra. The UST Symphony Orchestra, the training orchestra, where early career instrumentalists and conductors train for a future as professionals with the Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra and other orchestras in the Philippines and the world. Ballet Philippines has produced major works, dancers, and choreographers that are now part of Philippine classical and modern dance history. They also run the largest ballet school in the country. Philippine Ballet Theater performs full-length classical and modern ballet works and have pioneered the creation of original full-length ballet pieces. They have also trained dancers that have become world-class performers. The Philippine Madrigal Singers is considered a national treasure for being one of the few choirs to win the European Grand Prix twice. The Philippine Madrigals is considered one of the world's best. Tanghalang Pilipino produces original Filipino plays, zarzuelas, modern musicals, and runs the Actors Company, which has produced talents that have become major players in television and cinema. Bayanihan Philippine National Folk Dance Company is a brand in itself, as it espouses cultural diplomacy by performing Philippine heritage through folk dance and music. The Ramon Obusan Folkloric Foundation performs ethnic and traditional dance based on extensive ethnographic research done by its late founder, National Artist for Dance Ramon Obusan. The National Music Competition for Young Artists is a nationwide search for the next best young performers in classical and traditional music and dance. The program has produced the next generation of virtuoso artists and groups. The CCP produces and hosts festivals like The Pasinaya CCP Open House Festival, considered the largest multi-arts festival in the country, attracting more than 50,000 audiences and performers in a single day. The festival is offered free to the public. The Cinemalaya Independent Film Festival is now regarded as the largest and most influential independent film festival, which has produced short and full-length feature films that have garnered international awards and changing the landscape of cinematic art in the Philippines. The 13 Artist Awards and Exhibition chooses the most promising mid-career visual artists. The program has become the launching pad of the careers of painters, sculptors, installation artists whose works are now recognized in Asia and the world. Our list of festivals goes on. The International Guitar Festival, the Orchestra Festival, the Virgin Love Fest, the International Jazz Festival, the National Theatre Festival, and the Earth Day celebration.
The images you just saw were taken before the pandemic, and definitely many things have changed since then. But of course, since we are live performance arts venue, we'll definitely go back to our live venues with our digital learnings on hand. And it was great to immediately connect with future collaborators on this platform. It was quite a serendipitous meeting, and I think this signals great connections and great collaborations to come. So maraming salamat. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's amazing news. The CCP is open again. And I'm sure, like everyone else, I'm super excited to hear more about the 21st Century Art Museum. So thank you again. So our last speaker today is Pauline Juan. I probably mispronounced that, and my apologies. Who is the Executive Director of the Center for International Trade, Expositions and Missions. A champion of Filipino creativity and ingenuity, Pauline leads efforts to promote Philippine export products and services in the global market through the agency's roster of signature events and international participation. She will talk about CITEM and their work with local creative enterprises and the international market, as well as entry points for partnerships in this exciting sector. So welcome, Pauline.
Good morning. My name is Pauline Juan. I'm Filipina with sort of a lollipop head and with a Chinese heritage. I have long black pandemic hair, which means I haven't cut it in about 89 weeks, which is the length of our quarantine. So it's now the longest and past my bra line. I am the Executive Director of the Center for International Trade, Expositions and Missions, and we thank the British Council for this opportunity to talk about the Philippine creative industry today. CITEM is the export promotions arm of the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry. As an exhibitions and content trade promotions office, CITEM #1 hosts signature homegrown events and content channels. And #2, we organize country participation in different overseas trade shows and programs. Let me quickly run through our signature local shows and content channels. Feel free to check out the URLs as I speak. The first is Manila Fame, Asia's longest running trade show for the home, fashion, and lifestyle sectors. In October 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, we built and launched fameplus.com, a lead generation and promotions platform, which boasts digital storefronts and an online magazine, among other features. A year later, which is just this October, we added FamePlus Market Days, a digital sourcing festival cum conference, to our roster of events. Our banner sourcing event for Philippine food is IFEX Philippines. So in September this year, we hosted the first IFEX Digital Expo, where we assembled the country's food exporters and our global buyers. During the IFEX Digital Expo, we also launched 2 websites, foodphilippines.com, a community platform that aims to gather Filipino food enthusiasts from all over the world, and ifexconnect.com, a trade-focused site intent on generating leads and promoting our top food exports. In June this year, we launched Creative Futures, an online conference meant to provide opportunities for the creative sectors to network and collaborate and sell their goods and services. Our website, createphilippines.com, offers original and aggregated content highlighting the diverse talent and projects within the different creative sectors. This December, we will launch a directory on the website where the world's employers, suppliers, media, and other interest groups can gain access to our network of Filipino creatives. We are also set to launch the Sustainability Solutions Exchange, or SSX, which aims to promote and give initially our stakeholders in the home, fashion, and lifestyle and food industries access to sustainable solutions and technologies. Our website, sustainability.ph, will go live in January, and our first event, a digital conference and expo, will be held in March of 2022. All these CITEM assets serve and work with the creative sector, and our goal as a promotions agency is to make them searchable, accessible to the world, and to foster an environment where they can sell their goods and services. Apart from assisting the creative sector, CITEM is also employing more creative services as it shifts its operations from exhibition to exhibition plus content. So in the interest of time, I'm going to sprint through this list of insights of Filipino creatives in the global market. This list surely does not capture the diverse talents in the industry. It merely echoes some of the continuing conversations we've been having. We've also made some changes to this talk that couldn't be reflected to the PowerPoint presentation. So we apologize for that. So let me begin this list with saying that the Philippine creative talent is widely employed across a variety of industries, from film and animation to media and entertainment all over the world. Pixar, for example, continuously champions the work of Filipino animators by putting them at the forefront of the production process. Among those in the roster of luminaries are Nelson Bohol, Virginia Cruz Santos, and Paul Abadilla, who have worked on Inside Out, The Incredibles, and more recently, the Oscar-winning Soul. This year, Pixar Shorts also launched Filipino-American Bobby Rubio's Float on YouTube. Netflix's animated series, Trece, which was originally a graphic novel, was created by Budget Tan and Cajo Baldismo. Eric Matty's film, On the Job, premiered a 6-part series on HBO Go last September. Other things we talk about a lot are like how advertising practitioners hold key executive positions in global offices, how Filipino performers abound in theater and music halls all over the world, as well as Disneyland parks, where they are featured performers. The world's finest and well-loved restaurants have Filipino cooks and chefs in their roster, and indeed the gastronomy sector has been included in the within the Philippine creative sector. I know in the UK it is not counted when you count the industries for the sector. The Philippine game development sector is known to offer the global market a wide range of services from planning to post-launch. But an exciting insight to note is our contribution on the demand side. Filipinos spend an average of nearly 11 hours on the internet, making us the most active users in the world, while 74% of the online Filipino population play games on mobile. One of the games this market has been playing and earning money from is Axie Infinity, created by a Vietnamese game studio called Sky Mavis. But much of its success comes from Filipino users. It is a digital pet universe where players breed, battle, and trade digital creatures called Axie. So it is the first blockchain game applied as a mobile application. Its NFTs are cryptographically unique, unreplicable, and scarce. So there's a fee to play, and gaming guilds like Yield Guild Games are offering scholarships for gig workers to get into Axie. In other words, they pay gamers to play and breed these NFTs for them. So this Filipino company, YGG, is currently running a community of 45,000 gamers and is quietly developing a different earning revolution, play to earn games. And obviously, this has launched a whole frenzy into who can figure out this whole gaming universe, this new gaming universe. Another thing we talk about a lot, Filipino freelancers, particularly in the communication design fields, are also widely employed in online platforms like Upwork. A key observation we've made is how the Philippine creative industry has become more service-oriented rather than original IP generators. The service-oriented industries and human resources will always be important and supported, but it's about time we set up a path towards original IP generation as well. So how is digital transformation affecting us? It offers opportunities for the creative industries to improve quality of output and operational efficiency. However, the high cost of quality internet bandwidth, software licenses, and training and acquisition of the latest equipment also challenge our margins. So while the fast-changing landscape of content consumption continues to challenge business models of big publishers, TV networks, and studios, it has also given opportunities to independent creators and startups. Apart from digital transformation, the pandemic has also affected the creative industry. So this slide, as reported by the Creative Economy Council of the Philippines, shows that the industries in the green column who enjoy high demand and have been able to deliver supply despite lockdown restrictions. These are mainly digital creative and content services. Industries in the orange column suffered mostly during the lockdown and are slowly getting back on their feet as the economy is opening up. Industries in the red column were badly hit as theaters, events, and tourism activities had to shut down. So in summary, digital creative services are taking advantage of opportunities to pursue growth, while performing arts and entertainment have had to redefine their business model. So what kind of support are we looking for moving forward? Number one would be exposure. The most immediate thing you can do to help us is to tell your network about Filipino creatives every chance you get. Tell the press, curators, and tastemakers, agents, investors, VCs about us. The CITEM websites are rich with content about what the Filipino creatives have to offer. Feel free to share our stories or refer your network to our sites. Another thing is funding. Funding is always welcome, and we are thankful for the support the British Council has always extended to the Philippines. As for content, we ask for your support in multiple ways. We need assistance in identifying and connecting with resource persons and materials that we can feature in our digital channels and events. And we likewise need your support in sharing our content on your platforms and participating in our events. So what are the challenges that we are facing? Ease of doing business in the Philippines has to improve to attract investors Number two, we have poor and expensive internet service compared to most countries. We need to establish career pathways, just like how South Korea did for entertainment and Singapore did for game development. We have the talent, but other emerging providers such as Malaysia and Vietnam are getting better support from their governments. So these are some of the reasons why we are supporting the enactment into law of House Bill 10107, or the Philippine Creative Industries Development Act, as it seeks to establish the policy framework that will drive infrastructure, education, and financial enabling mechanisms. It aims to nurture the creative industry so that it can thrive and generate revenue for a post-pandemic recovery for the country. So as I close this presentation, I invite you again to visit createphilippines.com, read our stories, read and share our stories about Filipino creatives. Maraming salamat, thank you very much, and mabuhay.
Thank you, Pauline. And thank you everyone for your talks. Actually, Pauline, I was just thinking about Yason Banal's work on the internet in the Philippines as he was speaking there. But we've had such fantastic different talks here, thinking about social activism and community art, contemporary art and curatorial practices, performance, theatre, the digital arts, as well as food, fashion, animation, gaming, and a host of other outputs. So I'd like to invite all our four speakers, Deirdre, Pio, Chris, and Pauline, back onto the virtual stage. If you have any questions from the audience, you can leave them in the chat and we'll make sure to get them to the speakers afterwards. But if everyone's here, I think coming off the back of Pauline's closure, I think the question I'd first ask is, what do you think, in a kind of negative kind of imprint of what we want to get to today, is think about what the barriers are to collaboration in the arts and creative industries between the UK and the PH that you've come across within your own work, because obviously it's those barriers that we're trying to kind of negate and get past. So I'll start in order of our speakers, and then the next question I'll go in reverse. So Deirdre, what do you think in terms of the barriers for more collaboration in the arts, culture, and creative industries between the UK and the Philippines?
I think the barriers are largely around moving bodies. I think what I've seen work is the short artistic residencies in the UK, where people are affiliated with UK institutions and or Filipino community groups and able to build networks. That's how I've worked with Natalie Dagman and how we've been able to put that project together. And it's drawn me into her wider networks and people from her wider networks into mine. So more time in country on both ends, I think is pretty, it is the barrier, because there's nothing like the being there, the eating the food, the spending time, the seeing the gallery space, the exploring the artistic practice, the meeting the friends and collaborators. So despite moving into this brave new digital world, I think we can possibly do more in-person and physical work, as well as supplementing that with kind of online workshops and fora to build momentum.
That's great, Deirdre. Thank you for that. And Pio?
Yeah, I think I agree with Deirdre. It is like, it's the moving of bodies. And, you know, I think with the Gasworks residency, you know, it was initially a challenge to set up, but I think having these affiliates that would enable that, you know, the kind of, you know, the fluidity of travel, which seems like a strange phrase to think of at the moment when that seems like a distant concept. But I think also from my end, as someone who's kind of invested in historical narratives, that the knowledge production, there still needs to be more of an awareness of the Filipino context, really. You know, that there's so many Filipinos in the UK, but I think it's still very much, and I guess it's a function of colonial relationships. The Philippines is still very much like tied to American histories. So it's not seeing Philippine history as something distant from the UK, but actually something embedded within the diasporic experience within London, within Manchester, within Glasgow. Yeah.
That's great, Pio. Thank you. Yeah, both super interesting answers. Chris, can I come to you as well?
Yes, the obvious barrier most of the time that's so practical here with our work CCP is funding. For collaboration, as collaborations, partnerships, residencies cost monies. It costs monies to pay artists, to bring them over, to market them, and so on and so forth. And right before the pandemic, things changed slightly because of international airfare sort of became more accessible because of the presence of budget airlines. So we were actually seeing more international exchanges because of that development, especially in the region. But of course, we don't know how it will look like after as we emerge from the pandemic. That is why the cooperation of the embassies, the existence of cultural agreements which mobilize government funding and public funding to make these exchanges happen are important and needs to be followed through if you want to make this happen.
That's super interesting, Chris. I think one of the things I found so fascinating when I was doing research locally in Manila was how budget airlines had really, and budget airlines and Facebook had really enabled this kind of Southeast Asian interlinkages between that actually kind of were able to kind of go beyond institutions, so to work kind of underneath institutions, which then did lead into these much more kind of long-term developed and then latterly institutional relationships. Pauline, from your perspective?
Rafael, I did say exposure and funding earlier, but my earlier point about exposure, I just wanted to say, I guess getting the information out that that there are collaboration opportunities available. I used to work in the private sector before joining government, so I was in publishing for about 15 years, and when I was in private sector, it never really occurred to me that there was help to be had. Particularly, with arts and residency programs, these were things that were much more obvious. But within the creative industries, it wasn't immediately obvious, or that there are agencies out there who could fund, for example, or be a resource person for you. So moving into government, when I did in 2018, it was. It really struck me how it is entirely a different community, and that the people that we speak to, I guess with the NGOs and with the different government agencies, are really different from the smaller private sector communities that work within the different creative sectors. So I think an important part here, particularly now that digitalization is rampant, is getting to different communities and finding a way to reach out and build on our communities. As you know, the algorithms kind of lock you into the same people who like your posts over and over again. So it's getting past that and getting the information out that collaboration is indeed possible.
Super interesting answers from all four of you. So yeah, I totally agree. In all cases, I think time, is such a crucial resource. So moving the bodies, but like enabling time at particular locations. I know when I was conducting fieldwork in Manila, when I told people that I was staying for more than a week and I'd be there for like 2 months, 3 months, immediately kind of the relationship between like ourselves changed, because there was not only a commitment, but a knowledge that you could, create a relationship rather than to have to kind of quickly enforce it. Awareness of the context is another fantastically important point, in particular locally, where you have a huge Filipino community in the UK who are strangely hidden. And I think that the knowledge of kind of the history and the very specific and ongoing colonial history, Dr. Cristina Juan called it kind of the hidden colonialism that still exists between these ties within the UK and the Philippines, is something which is embedded but hidden, as Pio was saying. Funding, always the key thing, to even not an ongoing and forever funding, but to start things off, to engage these relationships and to enable them to continue of their own volition. And I think, as Pauline said as well, reaching out to communities who may not know what resources are available to them. So to get kind of these resources outside of these networks where they just kind of stay within, and you have the same people getting access to the resources rather than to enabling other communities to have access to them as well. So then the other question I'd ask as well, I know we're really running out of time, is how you see the British Council's role here, right? We have a chance here to kind of like prod at them in terms of facilitating these links and partnerships. I've been very lucky to have had a chance to work with Malaya, who will be speaking to us very shortly, and seeing the really fantastic work they are doing to engage this. But then maybe, okay, we've got 5 minutes left, and maybe 30 seconds each, like what else, what you see the British Council's role here, and how else you would like them to be kind of helping to develop these collaborations. So going in reverse, and I'll go Pauline back to Deirdre then. Then we're gonna have to have really quick answers. I'm sorry.
Well, for CITEM and all our shows, we've actually spoken to Malaya about this, and it's really finding resource speakers for us to help with knowledge sharing seminars and to capacitate our stakeholders.
That's great, Chris.
Yes, just during this pandemic, the digital pivot, we fell into the digital rabbit hole. One of our big projects next year, we're going doing a collaboration with our digital whiz generation by transforming. You see behind me is a 12-volume encyclopedia of Philippine art, which was which we consider as the most comprehensive, authoritative source for anything about Philippine arts and culture. And we are looking at, we have a digital version of this, and we're looking at gamifying the whole experience and content and see how it could even broaden its reach. So definitely that's an area where perhaps UK might have some kind of inputs and possible collaborations in terms of expertise and enhancing this kind of initiative.
Thank you, Chris. Pio?
I think from my end, it's signal boosting, right? It's kind of championing achievements that are already in place, and making sure that there's a wider network. I think this is amazing, because normally my Zoom seminars are very much situated within a contemporary context, but it's nice, it's wonderful, to see Pauline, to see Chris, to Deirdre, that there's this wider conversation happening, and to actually enable these exchanges that sometimes we get so stuck in our own categories, and to kind of open it up and have these exchanges and know exactly what each one of us is doing is really is really important, and could be a potential game changer in terms of expanding the network.
Thank you, Pio. That's great. And Deirdre, to finish?
Yeah, for me, I would say opening up and making it more democratic. I think Filipinos often have great craft and artistic skills, and it is a great way to introduce the importance of that culture, the colonial connections, and the ongoing colonialism to a global and wider audience, and to recognize it, to expand the offer, to make this accessible to people who are not actually going to identify as practicing artists, but have a creative practice that they use to nurture themselves, their networks, and their communities. I think that's very much along the ethics of nationalism that Deputy Speaker Legarda described. It's very much a creative allegiance.
That's fantastic. Thank you to all the speakers. We've gone over time, of course. I think we've got just about a minute left. So I'm going to pass straight over to Malaya del Rosario, the Head of Arts and Creative Industries in the Philippines.
Thank you so much, Rafael, and to our dear invited speakers. That was an amazing discussion. And as always, I wish we had more time. That was super dynamic, thought-provoking, everything. So I heard my name mentioned several times. My name is Malaya del Rosario, Head of Arts and Creative Industries at the British Council in the Philippines. I am an Asian woman in my, let's just say 30s, with short black hair just over my shoulders. And I'm wearing a white top and a blue necklace. So just to close, we would love to hold on to all the ideas and the interest coming out from you and the participants and coming out of Partner Southeast Asia, I just wanted to share, again, the entry points, this time from the British Council perspective on how we can work together. And there are many ways, but I wanted to highlight 3 ways. First is, of course, through brokering and connecting. If you have an organization or individual in mind who you would like to get in touch with in the UK or in the Philippines, we can help make these connections. We would be happy to connect you. Second is through grant support. So you may have seen some of our grant programs in the Opportunities Pavilion at Hop-In. If you're looking for an artistic collaborator, we have these regular grant programs that can help make this collaboration happen. And third is through developing partnerships. And actually we have a slide to show you how a partnership typically develops. We've supported many different projects, but a partnership typically develops the same way. So if you're looking to develop a new project, whether it's an arts residency, an exhibition, or a research project, and especially if you would like to get in touch with any of our speakers here, with any of the organizations who kind of presented today, and just explore some ideas, we can help these international partnerships navigate each step of the partnership process. And with that, we would love to hear from you and continue the conversations from this session today. You may get in touch with our team through the contact information that we're going to be flashing in your screens right now. Let's keep in touch so that we may continue sharing the best of the UK with the Philippines and with the world, and the best of the Philippines with the UK and, of course, the world. There is a post-session huddle in the spaces or Hop-In found at your leftmost column. So if you have more time, please come and join us. And of course, in 15 minutes, we have our final facilitated networking session called Connections That Count. It's going to be fun. It's going to be lively. And of course, we'll be announcing the UK Southeast Asia Play Award winners. So until then, this is Lai signing off.